Paul sucks at fighting. Jake Paul doesn't know MMA. Jake Paul will never fight MMA. Jake Paul will never beat anybody meaningful in MMA.
Every single expert, every armchair critic, they all said it. Jake Paul is a joke. He can't fight. He doesn't understand the true grit of combat sports. And MMA, that's a bridge too far. He'll never even step in the cage. He'll never beat anyone worth mentioning. This was the narrative. A narrative built on dismissal, doubt, and a refusal to acknowledge the inevitable.
Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? Because it just sounds like a lot like what I used to say in around 2019 about Jake Paul and boxing.
But are you really sure about that? Because if you listen closely, if you pay attention to the patterns, this isn't just deja vu. This is history repeating itself, right down to the cynical whispers. This is the exact same chorus we heard just a few years ago. The very same lines, the identical skepticism when the world scoffed at Jake Paul's boxing ambitions. Remember that? The derision was universal, the dismissal absolute. And look where we are now. This isn't just about fighting. It's about power, perception, and a strategic genius the skeptics consistently underestimate. Played only over B-roll footage, Jake Paul is not just a fighter. He's a disruptor. He's a master of the narrative, a puppeteer pulling the strings of public opinion. When he entered boxing, the established order laughed. They saw a YouTuber, a clown, a fleeting sensation, but Jake saw a void. He saw an industry ripe for innovation, a fan base hungry for spectacle, and opponents blinded by ego, underestimating his drive. He didn't just step into the ring, he rewrote the rules of engagement. He forced an entire sport to pay attention, to adapt, or to be left behind. This wasn't accidental. This was a calculated invasion, executed with surgical precision. And now, he's eyeing MMA. The reaction, identical. The dismissal, just as fervent. The question isn't whether he can do it, but whether the MMA world, like the boxing world before it, is prepared for the inevitable shift he brings. The sheer audacity of his ambition isn't a weakness, it's his greatest weapon. He thrives on being underestimated. He converts skepticism into fuel, doubt into dollars, and right now, the entire industry is about to witness the next chapter of that playbook unfold.
And he said that the direction he would like to go is an MMA fight opposite Nate Diaz, and he even laid out what would have to happen for that, which is only one thing. Nate, go out there, beat Mike Perry.
This isn't just idle talk, this is a strategic declaration. Jake Paul isn't vague, he's outlining a clear, actionable path, an MMA fight against Nate Diaz. Not just a fight, but a contingency. Nate, go out there, beat Mike Perry. This isn't a wish, it's a blueprint. He's laying the groundwork, setting the conditions, almost as if he's managing an opponent's career trajectory. This isn't about hope, it's about leverage. Jake Paul is dictating terms, not asking for permission. This level of control, even over a potential opponent's immediate future, speaks volumes about his position in the combat sports landscape. He's not just making a challenge, he's orchestrating an event.
That would be his first option, including over a boxing match with Francis. Now, this is a wild...
This is the bombshell. This is the moment where the conventional wisdom shatters. Over Francis Ngannou, the undisputed heavyweight king of devastation, a boxing match that would guarantee a colossal payday and global headlines. To choose Nate Diaz in MMA instead reveals a profound understanding of risk, reward, and long-term career strategy. It's a move that appears counterintuitive on the surface, but upon deeper inspection, it's a stroke of genius. It demonstrates that Jake Paul isn't chasing the biggest name. He's chasing the most strategically advantageous narrative. This choice isn't driven by bravado, it's driven by a cold, calculating assessment of his own trajectory. Played only over B-roll footage. Let's be clear, this isn't just an interesting proposition. This is unprecedented. Name another athlete in the world who could realistically generate this level of interest in both a heavyweight boxing clash and a middleweight MMA bout. You'd be hard-pressed to find one. Maybe Conor McGregor, a star of unparalleled magnitude, but even his crossover was primarily focused on one boxing spectacle. Jake Paul is proposing a fluid multi-sport career, seamlessly transitioning between disciplines. This isn't just about athleticism, it's about marketability, narrative control, and an almost superhuman ability to command attention. He transcends the traditional boundaries of combat sports. He's a genre unto himself. This unique position isn't accidental. It's the culmination of years of meticulously crafted public persona, aggressive self-promotion, and, crucially, proving the doubters wrong, one fight at a time. He isn't just fighting, he's building an empire, brick by controversial brick. And every time the world declares him incapable, he simply shifts the goalposts and proves them wrong again. This is not just a fighter, this is a cultural phenomenon with a devastatingly effective business model.
Is there anyone else that you could say that about? Is there anybody else that you could say can go box at heavyweight or could fight MMA at middle and you'd be interested?
Think about it. Is there anyone else? The answer is almost certainly no. Jake Paul isn't just a personality. He's carved out a niche that practically no one else occupies. He's created a lane where he is the sole traffic. This isn't just about being a star. It's about being an irreplaceable star in a specific high-stakes context. He's not a participant, he's a catalyst. He makes things happen simply by virtue of his presence and his willingness to defy convention. This is strategic scarcity. He makes himself indispensable, forcing the biggest names, the biggest promotions, and the biggest networks to contend with his unpredictable, highly lucrative ambitions.
Almost like he's applying for a job, which is really what a fight interview is about.
This is the ultimate power move. Jake Paul, the promoter, the network partner, the architect of his own events, is publicly applying for a job. It's a brilliant inversion of power dynamics. He's not begging for a fight. He's conducting an interview. He's assessing the candidates, Ngannou, Diaz, maybe others, and making his case for why a particular path benefits not just him, but the entire ecosystem. This isn't just about fighting, it's about perception management at an elite level. He makes it seem like he's just another contender, when in reality, he's the CEO of his own fight enterprise. It's a masterclass in strategic humility, masking an ironclad control over his own destiny, played only over B-roll footage. The early days of Jake Paul's boxing career were driven by a primal need for respect. He was the outsider, the internet sensation invading a sacred space. Every win, every knockout, every step up in competition was a defiant shout, "Respect me." And he achieved it. He earned that respect, not just from fans, but from many within the fight community who initially scoffed. But now, the game has changed. The respect me phase is over. That test has been passed. The era of proving himself to skeptics has given way to a new, more dangerous phase. Pure, unadulterated competition. It's no longer about whether he can fight, it's about who he can beat and how he can beat them. This shift in motivation fundamentally alters his strategic calculus. He's no longer taking fights solely for the spectacle. He's taking them to win, to elevate his actual fighting credentials. This transition from spectacle merchant to legitimate competitor is perhaps the most significant evolution of his career. It means every opponent, every decision carries exponentially higher stakes. He's moved beyond just getting a reaction. He's now pursuing a legacy, however unlikely it once seemed.
I feel that he's already done that. That test has been passed for life. And now it's strictly about competition.
This is a critical distinction. The respect chapter is closed. He cleared that hurdle. This isn't about public validation anymore. It's about wins, losses, and the strategic positioning for future opportunities. The shift from proving a point to pure competition changes everything. It means his choices are no longer about making the biggest splash, but about making the smartest tactical move to further his athletic career. He's not just a showman. He's now operating as a genuine competitor, dissecting opponents, strategizing game plans, and seeking matchups that make sense, not just headlines. This is where the game gets truly interesting for Jake Paul.
How well could Jake do in MMA?
So, the question looms large. How well could Jake Paul actually do in MMA? This isn't just a hypothetical, it's a terrifying reality. It's the ultimate test, the purest form of combat.
It's very hard for me to conceive that he could last very long with somebody as skilled and somebody as dangerous as Nate Diaz. That's very hard for me to conceive, but the mere fact that we haven't seen...
Chael admits it. It's hard to imagine Jake Paul lasting long with someone of Nate Diaz's caliber in an MMA fight. Nate is a veteran, a submission specialist, a fighter whose jiu-jitsu is world-class. This isn't a boxing match where Jake can rely solely on his power and improved striking. This is a multi-dimensional war zone. The skill gap is undeniable, but the brilliance isn't in denying the gap, it's in acknowledging it and still choosing the path. It's in understanding that the attempt itself generates more value than many conventional wins, played only over B-roll footage. Here's the hidden truth that many conveniently overlook or simply don't know. Jake Paul isn't some complete novice to grappling. The narrative often paints him as a pure boxer who picked up gloves yesterday. But dig deeper and you find a foundation. Stories of time spent in jiu-jitsu, a discipline that demands incredible patience and technical understanding. More crucially, the undeniable fact that he wrestled in high school in Ohio. Ohio wrestling is a hotbed of talent, a state known for producing elite grapplers. This isn't just a casual hobby. This is a legitimate background in one of MMA's foundational disciplines. This wasn't a sudden whim to enter MMA. This was reportedly part of his original plan. Both Jake and Logan, from the very beginning, had aspirations in the UFC. They weren't just chasing boxing. They were chasing the biggest names in MMA: McGregor, Masvidal, Diaz. This isn't a leap of faith. It's a return to a path he once envisioned. This isn't an influencer trying combat sports. This is an athlete with a different trajectory, finally circling back to his initial ambitions. This hidden history fundamentally changes the perception of his MMA aspirations. It makes them not just crazy, but strategically calculated, leveraging an overlooked skill set that could surprise everyone.
Competitively, but we hear the stories. We hear stories that he spent time in jiu-jitsu. We do know that he wrestled in high school in Ohio. Like, we hear these stories that this was his original plan, that both he and his brother wanted to get to the UFC.
This is the key. These aren't just rumors. They're vital pieces of the puzzle. The jiu-jitsu background, the Ohio high school wrestling. This isn't the profile of a complete beginner. This is the profile of someone who understands the grind, who has a base, a foundation that most celebrity crossovers simply don't possess. His original plan was the UFC. This isn't a what if. This is him returning to an ambition. It paints a completely different picture of Jake Paul, not just an internet sensation, but a dedicated athlete who simply took a different, more lucrative route to his ultimate goal. He's not just talking, he's been preparing, perhaps for years in plain sight. This makes his MMA pivot less a gamble and more a calculated reveal of a hidden skill set, played only over B-roll footage. Now, let's talk about the true nature of risk. Not just the risk of losing, but the risk of damage, the risk to a career, the risk to a future. This is where the choice between Francis Ngannou and Nate Diaz becomes acutely strategic. A boxing match with Ngannou is a dice roll with potentially catastrophic consequences. Francis is the predator. His power is legendary. One punch, and it's not just a loss, it's a lights-out, career-altering concussive event. It's an exposure to a level of physical trauma that few survive intact. The risk is immense, not just to ego, but to long-term health. On the other hand, Nate Diaz in MMA, while incredibly dangerous, presents a different type of threat. Nate is a submission artist. He's gritty, he's relentless, but his primary method of finishing fights, especially against someone less experienced on the ground, is often a submission. A submission, as Chael notes, is pretty peaceful. You tap, the fight stops, and you walk away, ego bruised, but physically relatively unharmed. This isn't a fear of Ngannou, it's an intelligent assessment of damage mitigation. Jake Paul isn't avoiding a challenge, he's choosing a challenge with a more strategically manageable downside. This is not cowardice. This is a master negotiator understanding the true cost of doing business. He's protecting his greatest asset, himself, and his ability to continue generating headlines and revenue.
That's the one thing that really makes a distinction between Nate Diaz and Francis Ngannou.
This is the core of the strategic decision. The distinction isn't just about opponent's skill, it's about the very nature of the risk. Two vastly different paths, two vastly different potential outcomes for Jake Paul's physical well-being and career longevity. This isn't just a fight, it's a negotiation with destiny, and Jake is carefully weighing the terms.
But the damage is very different, right? Nate Diaz is very likely to finish Jake Paul, but he's very likely to finish him with a submission, which according to Hoist Gracie himself is pretty peaceful. As opposed to Jake against Francis, where Francis's only option is to try to put him asleep and bust his jaw. And it's just one of these different things.
This is the brutal truth. The damage is fundamentally different. Ngannou aims to switch off your consciousness, to shatter your jaw. It's pure, unadulterated destructive power. Diaz, however, while capable of striking damage, primarily threatens with submissions. A submission is a controlled end to a fight, a concession, not a catastrophic impact. This isn't about avoiding a loss, it's about avoiding permanent consequences. Jake Paul, the business magnate, is weighing the physical cost-benefit analysis. He's choosing a path that allows him to continue his career, continue his brand, even in defeat. It's a pragmatic, cold-blooded assessment of self-preservation disguised as a challenge. This isn't just about winning, it's about surviving to fight and earn another day. Played only over B-roll footage. In the cacophony of combat sports, amidst a landscape filled with incredible athletes and compelling storylines, Jake Paul stands alone. He is the singular figure capable of orchestrating such a wild proposition and making the entire world pay attention. He's not just a fighter, he's an event generator, a narrative architect, a walking, talking spectacle. He has the unique ability to transcend the traditional confines of sports, to pull in audiences from every corner of the internet and beyond. This isn't just about his boxing record or his grappling skills. It's about his magnetic pull, his controversy, his undeniable ability to capture the zeitgeist. He is the ultimate wildcard, the only person who can throw out a concept so audacious, MMA against Nate Diaz, opting over Francis Ngannou, and have every major outlet, every fan, every skeptic lean in and demand more details. He makes the improbable seem not just possible, but inevitable. He doesn't just ask for attention, he commands it. This isn't just a career, it's a masterclass in modern influence and monetization. He doesn't just invite you on a journey, he compels you to come along, whether you like it or not, because you simply cannot look away.
To me, that Jake Paul is the only one that can even make this argument, that he's the only one that can even bring this up and have us all willing to come along for the journey.
He is truly unique. Jake Paul is the only one with the influence, the platform, and the sheer audacity to propose a scenario like this and have it taken seriously. He doesn't just make headlines, he is the headline. He creates the argument, he dictates the conversation, and he ensures that the world is willing to follow him on whatever chaotic, unpredictable journey he chooses next. This isn't just a fighter. This is a force of nature, an unparalleled disruptor who has weaponized public perception and consistently turned skepticism into undeniable, bankable reality. He isn't just in the fight game, he is the fight game for a significant portion of the audience. Played only over B-roll footage. Now consider Nate Diaz, a legend, a pioneer, a fighter known for his unflinching willingness to fight anyone, anywhere. Nate has always walked his own path, prioritizing authenticity over corporate mandates. He was offered a colossal fight against Conor McGregor in the UFC. That door remains open, a lucrative return to his spiritual home, the ultimate legacy fight within the sport where he forged his name. But Jake Paul, with a single calculated declaration, has opened a second door. A door leading to an old opponent, a familiar face, a chance at redemption, or another massive payday against the problem child himself. Nate Diaz faces a profound dilemma: the traditional path of a UFC legend, or the unprecedented genre-bending spectacle with Jake Paul. This isn't just a choice of opponent, it's a choice of legacy, of financial future, of the very narrative that will define the twilight of his iconic career. Jake Paul hasn't just challenged Nate. He's presented him with an existential question, strategically forcing a decision that will shake both the boxing and MMA worlds to their core. This is Jake Paul's ultimate power play, not just fighting, but shaping the destiny of his adversaries.
Nate was offered a fight opposite Conor in the UFC, and Nate, with a victory over Perry, will still have that same opportunity. That door will still be open and the red carpet will still be out for Nate to go to the UFC. But now there appears to be door number 2. And door number 2 is a familiar face and an old opponent in Jake Paul. Which do you think that Nate would do?
This is Nate Diaz's fork in the road. One path leads back to the UFC, a reunion with his roots, a chance at the McGregor trilogy. The other path, orchestrated by Jake Paul, is a rematch in a completely different sport. Which one offers more intrigue, more money, more personal satisfaction? Jake Paul has created a compelling, unavoidable choice for Diaz, forcing him to weigh the emotional pull of the UFC against the disruptive, potentially even more lucrative, proposition of an MMA clash outside the established promotion. This is Jake Paul dictating the terms for two of the biggest names in combat sports. He's not just a challenger, he's a strategic puppet master.
Which would you prefer to see Nate Diaz do? Fight MMA against Jake Paul or return to the UFC?
So, the final question, the one that keeps us all glued, waiting for the next move in this chess match. Which path truly captures your imagination? Which showdown do you desperately want to witness? Jake Paul has forced the conversation, and now he waits for the world and Nate Diaz to make their choice. The game is afoot, and Jake Paul is holding all the cards.